Do you think that, holding summits like this are overrated? I mean, after all, men...
Sorry?
I said, do you think holding summits like this are overrated? After all, men don't hold men summits, to discuss men in leadership position. They just simply hold leadership, leadership summits. There's nothing like a men's leadership summit. Why do women have to have a special leadership summit?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, I think it's a very relevant summit for the simple reason that there are so many women out there who are frightened even of their own shadows. They're not aware of what they can actually do. To go to the second part of your question, why women? Because this is the first time really on a global scale in the history of the human race where women are actually coming out into the workplace, breaking free of the so-called traditional roles. And in order to leap across millennia where men have been all the time, you need to have something to galvanize them. I would like to use an analogy. Like for instance, if you knew you had to do JAM, for instance, and you haven't been to school for, say, 9 months, you would take an accelerated course, I think, to prepare you to bridge the gap. So I think these summits serve to bridge the gap, to show women what is possible and to show them the mature and right way to go at it. You remember I talked earlier that it's not a war, it's not something you need to fight, but it's something you need to do with focus. And many of us, when we are thrust into unfamiliar situations, tend to, become combative. But summits like this help to show people the focused and the mature way to approach these things.
How are the women who you've spoken with been able to internalize this message, especially when it perhaps conflicts, if I could use that word, with that school of thought that, no, you should give it to us because of women, rather than, no, we have earned it actually, whether we're women or not?
Well, one of the things that I learned yesterday at the summit is that saying, give it to us because we're women, is not necessarily the right approach. Give it to us because we've earned it is also not necessarily the right approach. I remember listening to Mrs. Tudor Matthew yesterday, and she brought that point out very succinctly. And what she said is that give it to us because, well, I don't want to say give it to us, but we're there because we've worked hard like everybody else. Don't go around with a chip on your shoulder. This is a space you have come to by dint of hard work. You will settle in it comfortably and confidently. So it's probably somewhere between the two things you mentioned. It's a new thought, and it's one that I didn't know I identified with until I heard it.
There must be some form of benefits when we have women that have reason in their career profession like yourself. Perhaps maybe we should start looking at the benefits of having women in that position in workplaces for an organization or for the military or any establishment. What are the benefits?
The benefits are tremendous. We live in an age of brain rather than brawn. I'm not going to pretend as a woman that I would ever be able to build the kind of muscles that a man would build. That's physiologically impossible. However, and that was true maybe a few centuries ago, when you just needed the sheer physical power to move the engines, to till the land, to do those heavy things. But now we're in the age of brain, where you can do just about anything at the touch of a button. Unfortunately, when you talk of intellectual capabilities, it does not discriminate between the genders. Therefore, women can bring whatever intellectual capability they have to the workplace to enhance, to improve, to help as partners in progress. So I think that's a very wonderful thing for this age that we happen to live in.
Are we taking things too calmly? Let's be very, let's also look at recent history when women have had to fight for suffrage, the right to vote. Well, we didn't have to do that here because it would seem that after some women won it, it became that every woman already had it. And, you know, there's certain areas where they just had to fight for certain things, maternity leave, being able to have shorter hours of work, you know, some sort of allowances so as to help them manage the traditional roles and also this newfound life and career. You say women should always be calm about it. Is it always realistic and possible for us to be calm under the circumstances?
It's not always realistic and possible to be calm. But you remember that the struggle for rights cuts across ages, gender, race, because don't forget, the civil rights movement in the United States in the 60s, 50s and 60s, it was men and women fighting for a right. And there were two sides. There was a non-violent side. And there were the other people who believed it was better to take up arms. You can go back to Mahatma Gandhi. He was probably the apostle of non-violence. He was a man. He was fighting for something. So there is no one size fits all to this. But I find that if you're able to navigate through stormy waters in the calmest possible way, you usually would have enough wind left over at the end of the day to make a difference. Having said that, though, sometimes you do have to elbow your way into what you need to get. And a lot of times you find that women actually take the opportunities that have been offered to them. And I want to digress a little and talk about Her Excellency Dame Patience Goodluck Jonathan. A lot of us are where we are today because she decided she was going to fight in a probably non-violent way for women to get at least 30%. And suddenly it became very easy for people like me to get to where we need to. She's a lady who saw an opportunity and saw something that she needed to do and did it. And then a lot of us are riding on the wings of that. So, like I said, there's no one size fits all. It's just doing the best you can where you find yourself, when you find yourself. Sorry, Chamberlain, because now I'm thinking of how you can leverage on this, what we call unique outlook for women in workplaces. How can we leverage on that so that when someone sees you or the next woman as an example, you can say, okay, 2, 3, 4 coming up can actually, well, how to use it in the local parlance, perform creditably well when they get there. So how can we leverage on positions of women in workplaces? Well, one of the things that I know that has remained more or less constant is the fact that they say when you give a woman a role, she would usually do very well. And I know this because coming from a place where you're outnumbered, you want to get there, you want to make sure that you do the right things so that those coming after you would have an easier time. So I think what women need to do when they're given opportunity is to make sure that they even work harder so that it becomes easier for those coming after them. It's never easy to be a pioneer because, first of all, you're not taken seriously to start with. Secondly, people think you're a flash in the pan. Thirdly, you have those who actually see that you're doing well, and they want to magnify the little perceived faults until they grow out of proportion. You have to be able to manage all those things. You have to, for me, what helps is to constantly remember that there are women coming after me, and I must do right by them. So I think that's the best way we can leverage.
All right, then. Well, that's where we have to let it go today. We've been speaking with Rear Admiral Itunu Hotunu, who happens to be the highest female ranking officer in the Nigerian military. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
And all the best with the summit.
Thank you.
We'll be back in just a moment. Join us again.